Welcome to the IoT Chat, where we explore the trends that matter for consultants, systems integrators, and enterprises. I'm Kenton Williston, the editor-in-chief of insight.tech. Every episode, we talk to a leading expert about the latest developments in the Internet of Things. Today, I'm talking about IT-OT convergence. As the manufacturing sector becomes more connected, businesses just can't afford to have their IT and O teams operating as separate islands. But what's the best way to bring these two teams together? And what does this trend mean for systems integrators? Here to talk more about this is Jan Burian from IDC and Sunnie Weber from Intel. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And tell me about your role at IDC and what brought you to the company.
My current position is a manager, or I'm leading a manufacturing insights team in IDC for EMEA. I'm based in Prague, in Czech Republic, and I'm with IDC for about 2.5 years. And the role is just like besides, let's say, leading the team, I'm also leading the practice, which is called Future of Operations, which is very IT-OT convergence driven, like that. And before joining IDC, I was working for UI and Deloitte for altogether for 11 years as a consultant. And I was in charge of performance improvement in the manufacturing environment, manufacturing and supply chain. Right? So here in the Central Eastern Europe, but I also used to travel a lot. I spent some time in Asia, in Western Europe, and I was at the very beginning at that Industry 4.0 area. So that was 11 years as a consultant. And prior to that, I was working in the factories. These were the suppliers for the automotive industry. And these were both based in Czech Republic or located in Czech Republic, but owned by German enterprises. My role there was, I was focusing on a quality management and on a project management. So I was responsible for ramping up the new production, the new parts within the production environment.
That's really cool. I didn't know you were in Prague. One of my best friends is from the Czech Republic, although not from Prague. He's from out in the middle of nowhere. I don't even know if there's a town of any meaningful name nearby, but he's very much a country boy. So that's good to meet a city boy from the Czech Republic. So Sunnie, tell me about your role and what you've been up to at Intel.
Sure, thanks. And thanks for having me as well. So I've been fortunate to work in the world of IoT for the last 8+ years now. And I've worked in sales and partner enablement, sales operations, and channel scale design before being able to focus on setting up partner programs for our edge partners, the operational technology solution and system integrator. These are those domain expert integrators who consult and recommend solution hardware and software components and provide end users that custom solution deployment, integration, and those maintenance services. So over the last 2 years, I've spent time focusing on that just right value exchange for this partner type and trying to understand and implement the programmatic ways for Intel to be able to support them. But just recently, I moved into a broader role in IoT as the Ecosystem Partner Strategy Lead. And I'm really excited to be able to take everything that I've learned and build a bridge across the ecosystem, helping our partners cross over from get to go to market with a goal of getting everyone faster time to market and more service opportunities. So really connecting our ecosystem is a highlight of our partner program's value exchange. And that's definitely the focus that I want to be able to bring to the table.
Yeah, that's great. So a couple quick things that come to mind from hearing both of your backgrounds. So first of all, I absolutely should mention that this podcast and the greater insight.tech program as a whole are published by Intel. So good to talk to a fellow Intel person here. And also everything you're saying about how important the role of systems integrators is and how central this concept of IT-OT convergence has become really are playing out a lot on the articles that we're publishing on insight.tech. So definitely encourage all of the folks listening today to go check out all the articles we have over there because there's lots of really, really interesting stuff happening. Sunnie, why don't you tell me from your perspective, what is behind this IT-OT convergence becoming such a big theme?
Yeah, actually, Intel sees a really big shift in digital transformation, this connection of IT and OT. It's no secret to anyone that IoT is extremely complex. It requires a strong convergence of technologies and people. I like to refer to the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of convergence. It's the merging of distinct technologies, industries, or devices into a unified whole. And that's exactly what I see happening with IT and OT. There's distinctly different players, invested stakeholders, and mutual priorities that are being forced to merge and produce these common solutions. And so Intel sees a significant play that operationally focused solution system integrators play in connecting the dots between IT and OT and helping to bring holistic solutions to the market. So that's why, as I mentioned before, we created these programs to support these partner types in the IoT ecosystem value chain to enable them to deploy faster, offer improved services, and really ultimately grow that business at the edge. And I think, Jan, you'll be familiar with this, but some of the supporting research that IDC did in the 2021 IoT spending report on IoT and edge, the global IoT market size in 2020 was posted as $309 billion. And despite the significant effects of COVID that happened after that, the market is actually projected to still grow to $1.8 trillion in 2028. So in fact, COVID impacts have accelerated this need for convergence of IT and OT into that digital transformation. And it's now a leading concern for the enterprise, who's essentially his captive audience now. So what we're seeing is that there's high demand for improved user experience with, for example, being applications-focused human-machine interfaces. So IT and OT converged is able to deliver that kind of value. It fulfills that need around secure infrastructure that gives the enterprises the ability to make those fast decisions, increase their efficiencies, improve their resilience, and perform this unlimited scalability. And this demand is what I think is very telling and directly tied to that IoT and digital transformation.
Yeah, you mentioned a report, and we actually are hosting on our site right now this really great, very detailed report from IDC on the topic of IT-OT convergence. So if you're looking for it there, the title is IT-OT Convergence, a growing opportunity for systems integrators. So Jan, I'd love to hear some more details of what you saw in that report in terms of why is this such a growing opportunity and what are the business benefits that are driving so many companies to look into this?
That IT-OT convergence would be definitely, or a word of IT-OT would be expanding after the pandemic in post-pandemic world. But that's not just driven by the remote work and all the stuff like a service or the focus on our services and so on. But it's also be driven by the different disruptions. So especially what we see in supply chain, all these, let's say, the problems with the containers or with the transparency of the whole chain. And also from another angle, that's about the growing or rising prices of the commodities, of the raw materials and components and so on. So there's definitely the bigger focus on transparency and flexibility within the whole chain. And also the manufacturing organizations, they are re-engineering their products. They are trying to embed the new services to become even more resilient in terms of business and securing the new revenue streams for the future. These are the areas where IT, OT, these both words, they're playing the crucial role. This is framing the situation. When it comes to the benefits, I just looked into the outputs of the IDC survey we just ran recently, and we see some, let's say, like a classic benefits like operational performance improvement, like a throughput and service reliability at the same or lower cost, for example, or there's a cost reduction just in terms of ability to share the resources across the IT, OT. That's improvement in customer service. I mean, personally, what I see here is also the one of the, I don't want to say like a new benefit, but something which is now appearing quite a lot in the results of different surveys is that sustainability perspective. That IT, OT, it could be seen or understood as the enabler of the CO2 footprint reduction, for example. This is something which is going to get, I would say, not just like a big attraction, but also there's a really growing importance of that because there are different regulations in the different parts of the world, but with pretty much the same goal to reduce the CO2, and the technology and the data from the OT environment is really something which is helping the organizations to start that journey. Sustainability, definitely, that's something what I see as the next big trend and also one of the biggest benefits. And maybe let me share also one quite important experience. I mean, typically we see these benefits could be like a OEE or could be waste reduction, whatever, by 5 to maybe 10 percentage points, which is good. But what's very important is also to have ROI or return on investment within, I'd say, boundaries in 1 or 2 years, and to be able to reach this target, 1 or 2 years in ROI. This is about the broader connection or integration of the systems. This is not definitely about the pilots or about isolated solutions, but this is about the ability to leverage the whole ecosystem of solutions within the organizations. So we're talking always about the ability to scale. This is very true when it comes to the building the solution with a 1 year ROI. But this is also, I would say, one of the most mentioned barrier when it comes to the IT-OT integration in real life.
Interesting. So there are a couple of key points there that I think are worth digging into deeper. So one is the issue of sustainability. And I absolutely agree that that is going to become just increasingly important as we go forward. I mean, it's already a big, big topic. And I think not only will companies desire to be more sustainable, but they'll be required to be more sustainable over time. So I think this is a very important criteria for everyone to look at. And the other thing that you mentioned here at the end of your very good points was the challenges to actually achieving this IT-OT convergence. And there's a lot of factors at play there, not least of which is that historically these groups have been totally separate from one another, have very different outlooks on how they do their work and what metrics are important to them. So, for example, on the operations side, very often it's crucially important to maximize uptime. You've got to keep the factories running, the containers being shipped, as we were just talking about. That can be challenging sometimes, so more important than ever. And on the IT side, on the other hand, it's been more about trying to innovate and keep up with all sorts of new technologies and rapidly deploying things. It's a very different mindset between these two groups. And of course, historically, the technologies they have used have been quite different as well. So, Sunnie, what do you see as being some of the key things businesses can do to bring these two teams together?
Yeah, I think it actually can depend on the perspective. So from an end customer perspective, you just literally need to get those CTO and COO teams in the same room, talking about what their objectives are and understanding the business experience and the use case that they're trying to ultimately deliver. That's just from the core side. But really what you see for partners is that they're the ones, the system solution integrators, Intel on our side, our sellers, we're the ones that have to help our end customers start having those discussions. We need to ask the right questions to get our end customers to be thinking that way as well. So one thing we strive to do is create coalitions. The coalitions are making sure that you're representing both the IT and the OT side, as well as the partners that need to be involved in this conversation, who are going to be the ones that are part of creating the solution together, the software provider, the OEM, who at the table needs to be together. So for our partners, another thing that's kind of interesting, just in addition to getting that correct assessment down with the end customer, our partners are actually being forced to either expand their working knowledge in either the IT or the OT, depending on their original focus, or they're actually partnering up with some complementary partners who are already experts. While that has maybe traditionally been seen as a little competitive or feeling like you're giving away business, it's actually turning into greater opportunities. So one example is one of our larger NSIs. They saw some tremendous value in business growth by partnering with one of our OTSIs. And now they've grown a huge pipeline together. So while they were traditionally maybe a competitive relationship, they're now going to business together and excelling. So one way that Intel is trying to help, especially our solution and system integrators, is through our Intel Partner Association membership. What we have the unique opportunity is understanding and having relationships with partners all across the ecosystem. And when you have the membership with Intel, you can get connected very easily to Intel validated partners through the solution marketplace, through Intel Partner Connect events, and through specialized matchmaking event opportunities that we're starting to have regionally. And the reason that's important is because we're working with partners who have solutions that are vetted and really deployed out there. So we're able to help partners connect to solid partners that they can go to market with confidence. So bottom line, in summary, I guess you could say the partners need to be willing to have those partnerships expand so that they can come to their end customers as holistic experts. And our end customers need to start merging and having those remove the siloed effect that has been traditionally known and bridge those CTO and COO teams to have those holistic conversations.
Got it. Now you're going to have to help me with a little decryption. Is NSI a network systems integrator?
Actually, they're the national system integrators. So they tend to be the larger system integrators. A lot of times they will partner up with the smaller, more regionally focused solution integrators or system integrators on the operations side. So maybe they're more on the design side and the operations technology experts are doing the physical integration on site.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's something we've talked about a lot on the insight.tech program as well, is how there are all these niche markets where the local SI is really going to understand their customer extremely well in a way that the larger SI just can't do. But conversely, the larger national SI will have technical capabilities and a breadth and scope of expertise that really is important in bringing these very different groups together. And so it is very much a complementary match. Totally agree with you there. So what I am wondering about at the same time, and Jan, maybe you can speak to this, is you do need a certain set of skills to be successful in pursuing these kinds of relationships and helping your end customers. So Jan, what do you see in terms of being some of the key skills and roles and responsibilities that might be changing in the interest of putting this IT/OT convergence forward?
Firstly, let me draw the typical structure or the different groups within the company, within the manufacturing organization. We have a C-suite, so decision makers, budget holders, influencers, sort of. So these type of managers, they definitely should be having better understanding of what or how digital technology could help to improve their KPIs, how the digital technology could bring the value to their company, how this could be helping them to reach their KPIs. So that's very crucial because these people typically, they have quite a big influential power. And if you're not able to convince them that that solution really brings the value, then it's very hard to just get there. That's the first group of the people within a typical manufacturing organization. Then there's another group. These are maybe let's start with the digital chief officer and people around this person, right? And typically, I would say typical role of CDO is searching and looking for the new technology, for new solutions and bring these solutions and ideas into the organization and discussing with the stakeholders or with the owners of the processes, with line of business leaders about how this solution could help them to improve what they do. These people, it's not just about like a detailed understanding of these solutions, but they also should be having the understanding of, how to work, for example, with the system integrators. This could be also like a first point of contact between the company and the system integrators. They really need to understand what's possible on the market. Technically, you can buy anything, but is the ROI really like 1 or 2 years? Or is a solution, could it be scaled within, like a short-term period? And also, does the solution comply with the long-term company strategy? That's also extremely important. So the people around or the team of CDO should be really having that deep understanding of technology, but also of the implementation deployment process. Then you have let's say another group. These are the IT people. And there's no doubt that these are the experts in IT security and in the, let's say, integration of these IT systems, typically RPA, PLM, whatever, right? So supply chain management systems. But what they really need to do is to get a better understanding of how the OT world works. What kind of protocols there could be. I mean, what's the cybersecurity threats or potential issues might be happening. So that's another group. And by the way, before I get to the OT people, right? So let me just maybe share one thing or one thought that a lot of people see IT, OT integration more from that, let's say, data perspective. So there are data generated on the edge, then they've been transferred to the cloud or to the on-premise IT systems, and then will be analyzed. And I don't know, and we can do like 1,000 different things with that, right? But that's let's say one perspective. The other perspective is that automation. I mean, IT data could be triggering different situation, or this could be controlling the production lines. There could be communication between IT layer and PLC, and PLC is operating, controlling, driving the production line. So there is, let's say, two-way flow of the data. Also, the IT people should understand the logic of this, because if IT won't work properly, then the production line could collapse. If it's just like about the data, getting the data from a line to the system, I mean, sometimes it's not that vital for the systems. But if it goes other way around, this could end up with kind of like a catastrophe in production. And of course, there's also a group of the OT. Sunnie already said, right? These are two different worlds. So these people should really understand how the IT works, right? How they could leverage, how the data they are acquiring, providing could be then processed in the very next steps. This is also very important. And in IDC, we see there's also maybe another group, and we call them digital engineers, and they are positioned exactly between IT and OT. It's like a converged team of the experts who are able to be a partner for the system integrator and are able also to be, let's say, like connector between IT and OT within the company. And these people, they typically are managing this IT OT deployment projects. And they also take care of the logic and of the architecture, overall architecture. And of course, the data management, that's another part of what they do.
So there's a lot to think about. You've given me a lot of good points there, but I'll see if I can summarize everything you just said by basically there's two key elements. There's the what are you doing, but there's also really the why are you doing it? You need to understand the perspective of the other side of the table, as it were. So Sunnie, something this is making me think about is we heard a little bit from Jan just now about how the end customer needs to have people who are bridging this gap. There's a real good reason to have people specifically in that kind of a role. But what about from the systems integrator's perspective? One of the things you talked about was matchmaking between different systems integrators. I'm sure that's a very important part of it. I imagine also it's pretty important to be able to identify the right kinds of solutions that are already designed with this type of IT-OT convergence in mind. Hopefully I'm not leading the witness here too much. Is that a key consideration? Anything else that you think is really important for SIs to consider?
I think what this really means for the system integrator is that there's actually greater opportunity. To Jan's point, they do need to skill up or at least educate themselves so that they are familiar with both sides of the world, and then be in that position to help the end customer merge those worlds as well. So there's this consultative approach that they can take in order to answer this holistic solution. If everybody is able to start having a conversation with the value and the experience that they want out of it first, it's really going to open up the conversation for that greater opportunity that they can deliver on. What I see the most is that the enterprise customers are in that position where change is being forced on them in order to remain agile enough to stay ahead, yet they may not recognize that. And so the system integrators are going to be that voice of reason, that voice of consultation that, hey, this is actually what's happening and why you need to remain agile and be able to stay ahead. So they need to be able to improve their operational efficiencies, provide that faster time to market of their products and services to meet the demand. And again, that flexibility to respond to changes in things like product quality and maintenance services using reliable data analytics that Jan was just talking about. But having this greater opportunity, I'm just going to go back to it again. It requires having the best parallel partnerships to be able to deliver and drive more business. So that's what's going to allow a system integrator to position themselves as a trusted advisor and a long-term strategic partner who can support that digital transformation, the IT/OT convergence that the customers are demanding at the edge.
That makes sense. And Sunnie, I think one of the interesting things you're pointing to there is this sort of sense that companies are being forced along in this direction. And I think it's always helpful to take these sort of changes and look at them more as opportunities than as challenges. I think that shift in perspective can really bring a different kind of thinking. So, Jan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the opportunities you see ahead. So, for example, one of the things that people have been talking about a lot in the last little bit is this idea of a metaverse. Are there new opportunities ahead in spaces like this that companies may not be thinking about already, that they can reconceptualize why they need to do IT/OT convergence?
Yeah, I mean, good point with the metaverse. I can get to that a little bit later, but let me just say that what we can see that the organizations need to be more resilient, generally speaking. That means they should be more transparent, more flexible, and be really able to react on almost, let's say, any disruption that might appear, right? So no one knows what's gonna happen. So in a month or for longer term, it's almost impossible. So that risk-based approach that was applied in management or risk management, that's already the old thing. So that the resiliency is probably kind of like a combination between the resiliency concept and the risk-based management is the best way for the future. And this is where the technology is really helping through providing the data. It doesn't have to be like a real time to be better, but almost like in a near real time data. Some of them being processed on the edge, some of them being processed on the cloud. So that's definitely helps the organizations on their transparency and flexibility journey. There's also, let's say, so many, I would say maybe like a new issues, but some issues which are more important than the others. Like, I mean, from the conversations with the end users, we always hear about capacity issues. So people issues, like people and organizations, it's very hard for them to drive the capacities, right? So one day they have like too much, and then the other day they don't have people to produce something, right? So that's a big problem with the supply chain as well. So that's why also companies are looking for new ways how to improve the customer experience, how to secure new businesses. And this is where we get to that metaverse idea, for example, right? So which is a totally virtual world. You probably know that from the environment like a Fortnite or Roblox and these types of worlds, where also industrial players already stepped in and they are selling their or promoting their products or their brands in that metaverse. That's one part. I call it civil metaverse. But there's also the industrial metaverse, which could be, and this is more like a digital twin based. And by the way, we didn't mention digital twin during our podcast, but that's one of the key, I would say, solution or output, whatever, when it comes to the convergence of IT and OT. So for this industrial metaverse, where the manufacturing organizations could be building the entire virtual production plants, which they can use for, there could be, let's say, a number of use cases from the, let's say, simulations or the testing or customer experience improvement and so on. These digital twins should be driven, fueled or powered by the data coming from a real environment. And this is where exactly this convergence between IT and operational technology is happening. Definitely, as I said at the beginning, the future would be even more about convergence of IT and OT systems.
Yeah, absolutely. So, boy, I have to say again, both of you have given us so many great ideas to think about, but unfortunately we are reaching the end of our time. So, Sunnie, I just want to give you the last chance here to add anything you think we might have overlooked, or just kind of any closing thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience.
Yeah, sure. The advice that we've been giving and the training we've been giving our own sales field is sometimes the best way to have this conversation on IT/OT convergence is to start at the end. What is the value that the end customer is looking for? Because you need to be able to help the partners and the end customers define, communicate, and deploy these value-based solutions that really inspire them and their customers, changing their business outcome. And then you can begin the evaluation of both the IT and the OT forces. So for example, identify what their current capabilities are. How do they source data? What is their end-to-end interconnectivity enablement? What device management systems are they working with? How are they managing compute? And what is their analytics setup? And then you can take that and say, okay, are these actually working together in this continuum to be able to provide the information they need that produces the outcome they're striving for? And so as system integrator can walk their customer through this conversation, through that continuum, that's when they can identify, for example, what is their existing quality control methodology and how is their supply chain for operations management? And does it apply the benefits to the bottom line? All of these things end up helping to enable the better operational models that buffer them from situations like COVID, allowing them to be more agile and responsive. And so when somebody is able to help identify the customer's strengths and weaknesses, that's when they can tap into the just right partners and then show up as that comprehensive, trusted advisor. So taking that time to dig in during those initial conversations and uncover the true value and experience they're trying to deliver, that's going to take their conversation from stopping at, hey, I just need some machine condition monitoring. It'll turn that conversation into, oh, actually, what I think you're saying is you want to improve product quality to drive business revenue and keep your customers coming back. And that's when you can bolt on the additional conversations around, well, maybe we need to think about employee safety monitoring in addition to this machine condition monitoring. And how can we turn these improved and targeted data analytics for tracking the quality control? It becomes this holistic enablement conversation of a greater value and service at the end of the day. So what that does is provides greater value to the end customer, and it provides more business for the system integrators.
Perfect. Well, with that, Sunnie, I just want to say thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And Jan, I'd like to say thank you to you as well.
Thank you.
And thanks to our listeners for joining us. To keep up with the latest from IDC, follow them on Twitter and LinkedIn at IDC. And you can also follow Intel on Twitter at Intel IoT and on LinkedIn at Intel Internet of Things. If you enjoyed listening, please support us by subscribing and rating us on your favorite podcast app. This has been the IoT Chat. We'll be back next time with more ideas from industry leaders at the forefront of IoT design.